Through the ringing noise I could feel the claiming that keeps my soul mortal, the pain that comes muted down the long white tube from the depths of the past, the rend of yearning about my clothes and the kisses that burn on my lips, how they call to my understanding. All at once and again the ground was torn from under me, and I was plucked as a sailor from the sea, tossed into a spiralling eye, and turned for trembling to the pole, a solitary magnetic needle soul. Once the tube had rolled its way back to me, I jumped in. Behind my eyelids it was all going on. Small transparent spots swarmed across my vision, and it felt like one of those days where the more you think about your problems, the bigger the heap grows. One of those days when you want to climb to the top and scream at the universe for conspiring against you. To add to all of that, I was embarrassed, had a head like a split grape, and when I coughed my joints ached. Of course I realise now the reason why such an unholy shroud of gloom bound me. It was the journey through the tube, and the sight that confronted me when I opened my eyes. Naturally my aim had been true. I had not intended to intrude upon any of her virtues. I hadn't intended to intrude at all. What could I do? I'd just woken up next to a girl I wanted to sleep with. Looking around, I spotted a greetings card that lay amongst the debris on the bedside table. Behind the picture of red roses, it was addressed to Valerie. "Sorry I missed your birthday. Why don't you come over Friday?" Above the dusty orange smudge, it was signed, "With love from Amy." By this time, the hammer of the gods was ringing hell's bells into my head. I just couldn't wrap my brain around where I was. The journey had left me with weak numbness again, but thankfully no paranoia that time. I pinched the back of my hand to make sure it was all real, just the same. That's when I spotted the collider on the floor. I slid out a foot to draw it closer, wiped away the mist from the portholes, and read the dials. 23rd of November 2007. It was at that point that Valerie sat up, eyed me with wayward calculation, and moved in for the reckoning. "Do you really think you can turn back the clock with another fake honeymoon?" she said curtly. I didn't have a clue who she was, let alone what she meant. When she stopped talking, a quick blush overspread her face. The same warm flush rose on my cheeks and somehow set us both at ease, but raised an even stranger question. "Have we met before? Am I the double of a real person, or a recurring one-night stand?" I answered her question with such a weak cliché. Well, it takes two to tango. It's cringeworthy on reflection, but she was extremely pretty. I suppose I was trying to preserve whatever we had, whatever that was. Save it for another point in time, with the possibility that we could meet again, if I survived the thing I'd gotten myself into. She spoke softly through her sleepiness. "Oh, why do you keep coming back, Sol?" Settling herself back into the pale sheets, her low whispers mixed with the sunlight that poured in through the window, became a kind of liquid stuff that washed all of time from my mind. I stopped thinking and merely felt. The bend in her waist, so soft, her body so warm, it seemed to melt into mine. I was so used to living without a woman by then, her youth and prettiness shocked me. When I touched her shoulder, there was a wriggle of dissent. It made me jump. And so it came to pass that a make-believe maiden as innocent as a sleepwalker blew the air around her face and tried for another sleep, while I tried to think of what to do. Once she had dozed off again, I kept a close eye on her breast rising and falling with the regularity of a pendulum. With the soft, sweet smile on her face, it was clear that no bad dreams had come back to disturb her peace. Settling down behind her, I traced a small scar down her shoulder blade, counted the freckles on her back, joined them together in a dot-to-dot with my grubby finger, completely sure that for one fleeting moment in the warmth and sanctuary of her bed, affection and understanding had passed between us, with no idea that there would be a time when all the scars would be mine. An hour passed and the room began to feel really close. Carefully, so as not to wake her, I got out of the bed, opened the window and strained my eyes towards the sunshine. Pure, unadulterated, honest-to-God sunshine. The real thing, free of creeping clouds and beaming down in great fat golden rays. The kind of day that in summertime would have mad dogs clock watching for midday, and Englishmen pulling on their knotted hankies, packing up their deck chairs and heading for Brighton Beach. With one eye open I peered over the dusty windowsill to the street. The black Jaguar seemed to wink back at me. Steel thoughts of my subconscious replaced them with its own. Ever since its rescue from the local funeral home, that car had been a labour of love for Valerie. The last Series 2 Jaguar XJS. Most unusual that it had been converted to a hearse, wrapped in decorated sheets and hidden away in temperature-controlled storage at the dead centre of the village, Lim's funeral home. Been rested for 5 years until the new Bentley 6 had come along. Valerie's brother had cleansed the life back into its leather seats, rubbed them into such a creamy supple, he'd had to name the thing Crombie in memory of an old warm coat. I soon came to realise that it was no ordinary Friday morning. It was so supernatural it caused a kind of chill to run up my spine that only a ciggy could settle. So I punched out to Palmer and thought about a long drive in a dark car. When I looked toward the kitchen, Valerie was dashing around with the kettle, drowning the green mould crystals that grew in the milk bottles, scorching everything in her path like a scorned vixen. Each rasher of bacon dashed in the pan marked a magnificent denouncement of a duplicitous lover, to be chased with a spatula, whirled with vengefulness around the oil and mocked with the uproarious lash of mushrooms that followed. I saw the heartbreak distilled in the chili and caper jars along the shelves, the sauce aimed like a fountain head of pure disobedience, the tin of beans thrown around with the contrariness of having the time of her life with another strange lover in the kitchen, until all my emotions were clutched away with a sizzling whisper. "Let's go to London," she said, grinning wildly at me, holding the spatula like a dagger. The eggs filled the pan and the sausages billowed and popped like balloons underfoot. The toast? That was 2-hour drive to Camden Town, to seize in the day and set in sail. Vintage cars can often be a case of don't drive your heroes. I thought about it too long and too hard, stared death in the face. That car was a slice of the night driven down from the sky, with evidence of a meteor strike on the rear wings. Now, I've got form for driving in hearses. I think Crombie could sense that. In fact, I got to thinking he had a soul of his own. He couldn't have been more real if he growled, fetched the morning paper, and bit the postman's arse. But I don't think he was faithful. He didn't really love anything except the road. Stuck to what he was born into, blowing down the tarmac, snorting white lines. Who was I to deny him his weekend run? So, with Valerie anxiously tottering around in her high heels on the curbside, I opened the door, got into the front seat, blessed the dashboard, steering wheel, gear lever, and began getting myself comfortable. The first thing I noticed was a saccharine smell of embalming fluid and the chrome tines, 6 of them that punctured the polished wood luggage rack waiting for a corpse. We were heading for the hustle and bustle of Camden High Street, fully loaded with snacks and supplies, including a lump of slightly damp wedding cake, all wrapped up in polka dots and paper lace. Once Valerie had inched down her dress, she climbed in, turned up the music, slid away the wet label from the beer bottle, and casually took her sips, being very careful not to wet her lips, as though it was champagne she was drinking. With the single turn of a key, all 12 cylinders blazed into life. The perfect start, a solid declaration of intent, and much more wrought than the obnoxious fanfare of a Ferrari, with a lovely low growl at the top end, the auto version of a Lancaster bomber flying overhead. Boy, he was handsome, with so many chrome buttons on the walnut dashboard, I couldn't keep my hands off. A sports button on the gearbox was unusual in the 60s, as were the car's power windows. Like every man who ever donned a black tie and sat behind the wheel of a black vintage car, just for a fleeting moment I was James Bond. Thrilled by the drumbeat of twin exhausts, I gently eased him off the pavement, tipped the wheels onto the road and pressed my foot brazenly onto the gas. I could smell the rush of fuel. It made him growl for more as we echoed off under the arches and along the village high street out of Christchurch. Through the rolling grassy bends of the countryside we flashed, and me, my God, blessing the impulse that compelled me to whip him faster through the milky veil of mist. Valerie was grinning beside me, her attempts to talk drowned by the roar. All we could do was exchange cheerful smiles. She accepted one of my palmers as a consolation, tapped the leafy crisp end on the dashboard, lit it with a gold ronson, drawing the smoke deeply into her lungs with a long sigh and then exhaling appreciatively. On that day she was wearing her hair long. The winding plaits recoiled on the beautifully rounded slopes of her shoulders. With a hint of self-consciousness, she checked her reflection in the mirror and then gazed back towards me as she repositioned a shock of fiery locks behind her ear. I couldn't help but notice her bare arms and legs. They were in need of some sun. The aroma of coconut butter limbs filled the car, and I inhaled, basking in the luxury. I couldn't stop stealing glances all the way. There was no heavy makeup except for on the lips, which were drenched in red. Through all the twists and turns she was classy and relaxed. The economy in her movements carried even to her ankle, where she wore a thin gold chain. By her feet she kept a brown suede tasselled handbag fastened with a broad ring of amber that matched her eyes. She put on a short dress, inappropriately I thought. As she reached to turn up the radio, the fabric clutched her hips. On impulse, I struck 2 matches on the ashtray, just for luck. As we got closer to the turn-off, we counted down the junctions together, exaggerating each number with growing excitement. 6, 5, 4. My knuckles white against the maple steering wheel by the time we finally hit the exit ramp for London. Some hard cornering took us towards Kensington and a road on which we were only just spared from a collision with a chronic James Dean coming the other way. I might have screamed some obscenity, or at least muttered something about his death wish, but not in that car, not on that day. We soaked up every landmark in silence, the majesty of Marble Arch and Park Lane. It made us 3 hunky-dories feel most important. We passed what seemed like an hour in search of the perfect parking spot, eventually finding the multi-storey on Pratt Street and bringing Crombie to a well-earned rest. As we walked closer to Camden High Street, with its crowds swelling into an ocean of colour, we agreed that we felt like 2 goldfish, floating around in a huge melting pot of language and the aroma of world food, incense sticks and the traffic fumes to fill the gills. Our leisurely stroll along the high street became a window shopper's paradise, with temptation at every turn. Skin art signs for heretics, tattoos for everyone, the painfully fashionable, exotically inebriated. If you're okay with the idea of being tattooed in a shop window, you can do your gap year and go back to your Spanish Catholic village with a lifelong reminder of Camden High Street. We thought we might be safer with the graffiti t-shirts, hand-sprayed with a flip-top can. We'd come too far to be serious. We couldn't resist buying them. The Pink Panther for Valerie, the Joker for me. Shook them around in the polythene bags like candy floss at the fun fair. At the end of the high street, greeted by the life-size bronze horses guarding the entrance to the stable market, the traders gathered under the old railway arches, a magnet for the kleptos, offering celebrity photographs and memorabilia, second-hand furs and most things curiously retro. Bar Cuba is right in the centre. That's where we were heading, seduced by the trumpets from the live salsa band that played for the retired couple who danced toe-to-toe at the same time every Saturday afternoon. The salty bare brick walls of the old mill, a perfect backdrop for the bold photographs of Che Guevara and overblown American cars finished in red, gold and pink. I ordered a bottle of the richest red. The sun slowly slipped away. We smoked a cigarette and the evening came. Like the 2 drifters on that moon river, we walked the mile back to Crombie. He was cold, I was cold. Cold of the idea of a journey home after all the elation. Valerie, though, she was just getting warmed up, singing to herself. Like a breeze that blows where it pleases, she naturally changes her mind. Can we drive to Brixton Academy? See if there's anyone interested in playing, she said, squinting her eyes at the mobile phone, scrolling through the glowing icons. always knowing something I didn't. After a short drive and some haggling with the tickets out, we were in and pressing our way to the front. The set was simple, adorned with lamps like a 50s jazz lounge. At just before 10, the house lights went down and the voice filled the place. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the one and only Amy Winehouse. Valerie slipped the brassy clips from her hair, untied a ribbon and let the strawberry locks fall down onto her shoulders. After a few tentative moments reckoning with her self-confidence, she raised her arms and began to sway to the slow and easy rhythm, waving and mouthing to her friends on stage.